So I'm going to get started. This is going to be so much information, like it's going to be insane. So it's actually a good thing that I'm recording it for everyone's sake, probably my own. Some of this information I forgot because I haven't gone over it in so long. But you guys haven't noted, I've talked about Guilford Tech because I went there, and I basically studied entertainment previously with this guy named Jeff Little, who was the manager for John Michael Montgomery and Keith Urban. He found, he was out there when some of these big songs in the early 90s were found and put on the radio. So at least I could say I'm qualified in that facet. I've been doing concerts for, this is probably for the video as well, I've been running concert events for a while, so I know that side very well. And I always talk to people about how to talk to booking agents and how to run concerts and how those kind of things work. But I don't consider myself an expert on record labels and on management. I probably could do managing if I really tried, but I don't really sell myself as a manager. But also I'm a performer as a drummer as well. So I would advise, try to really focus on this because I'm going to shoot so much information at you. It's going to be like drinking water through a fire hose. It really is. But first we're going to kind of look at characteristics of the music business. It's a competitive field. It's creative. It's ever-changing. And here's one of the most important parts, I think. It's entrepreneurial in nature. Does that make sense? That when you get that concept in your head that you're now business people selling your artwork, then you're going to excel so much faster when you gather that concept. And you gather the concept of how to do your artwork the way you want to do it, and not, because I don't want to say just be what everybody else is doing. That's not getting at that. What I'm saying is that do good artwork like you want to do it, but try to do it in a way that's marketable to an audience of sorts. That makes sense. That's why I joke that I'm a sellout. I don't believe in selling out really, just going pop or whatever. You can if you want to, but be creative at the same time. It's an industry where you have to be creative with your marketing, with your connecting with people, and so on and so forth. Attributes, you have to have a lot of knowledge, you got to be smart. So coming to things like these will help you out, and I hope you'll gain knowledge going to this. You have to have good communication skills. Speak clearly to people. You have to adapt, because this is an ever-changing market. You have to have random skills, and Jeff Little was telling me he needed a bass player for John Michael Montgomery for their tour. He had two really good options in Nashville at the time. He took the guy with the CDL, because he could drive trucks. While you're on tour, while you're doing a show, your drivers have to go to sleep because they can only drive so many hours. Well, if you have someone on the band who can actually move the trucks around the arena, then hey, that's another point, isn't it? It's a good option to have. So little random things like that is very, very helpful. Follow through. You'll be amazed how many people in this business you'll pay them to do something and they will not follow through. They won't execute. And honestly, I think people get successful at first because they follow through, not because they're good at what they do. Being good and following through gets you beyond you won't imagine from what I've seen some of my friends do, but following through is just absolutely crucial. Okay, so now here's a general map of how I picture the business, the industry. And so I got songwriting, publishing, recording, live sound, lighting, touring, management, performance. And if I was to break that down, these are not all the jobs that are out there. And I remember when I first saw this in a classroom, I said, oh my goodness, I can actually make a living at this. Because you don't have to necessarily pick one of these jobs. In fact, a lot of people who are starting in this field pick multiple parts of this job. I got a friend who wants to be a songwriter, so he's down here in this field, but he's a performer as well. He plays mandolin professionally. He plays in a lot of bands. He tours a lot. And a lot of people do that because you can't just make a living off of songwriting at first. It takes some years to do that. But once you make that living, you're sitting there all day around your house writing songs. It's great. You can be a producer, engineer, sound engineer. You can produce in a studio. You can do live stuff as well. There's so many options. Just whatever you're passionate about in this field, you can actually you can focus on that. But having more talents and spreading yourself out is the better to make a better living at this. So I'm going to do this case scenario. You guys ever been to Nashville by chance? I haven't really hung out there, but I've been through the town. They call that the Batman building. That's what some of my friends call it, for obvious reasons. unions. But let's say I'm a country songwriter, singer-songwriter, and I want to be the typical singer-songwriter and go to Nashville. But I'm a little different because I have a truckload of money, and I actually think I can get somewhere with it. I believe in myself. And so what I do is I get my, I move there, I take my songs, and I go to a studio, and I find a decent studio, and want to record 4 songs. So I'm a singer-songwriter, I want a full band sound, so what do? Well, I have to get musicians, right? So what do? I go to the union. So here's your first, we're going to kind of segue into unions, and I'm going to kind of keep this concept of me trying to become a famous country singer, hypothetically. So unions, they're set up for collective bargaining. Basically, for example, is that we'll have one union that's for musicians, and they actually have lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that lobby for laws for musicians, for example, or things like that. They do collective bargaining for accountants, insurance. Because, you know, you go to a job, you get benefits, right? Well, if you're a professional musician, you don't, or you're a union guy, you don't get benefits. But if you join the union, you have the option to get benefits. That's kind of one of the nice things about them. All of these are made up of locals. They call them locals. And they're put into different regions of the world. We have like the local 99 here for AIA, which we'll talk about, the local AFM. In fact, we'll talk about AFM. So I'm recording my CD. I go to this guy and I say, do you know anybody from the AFM or the local, what are they in Nashville? I can't remember what their local is. It's like 247, I think. You go to their local and you pick up these guys. He brings in some guys that he trusts, their drummer, bass player, all that stuff. And you set up a time for the session. Well, in these big cities, what's really cool is like New York, LA, and Nashville, they actually have, everything's so busy in the recording side of the business. They have set times, they have a schedule. So what it says on here is 10 to 1, 2 to 5, and there's a 6 to 9. I think 6 to 9 is not that popular for some reason. I guess people want to be home. So they do this every day. And they'll sit there and you'll call all these people on AFM and you'll say, okay, I got you set for, are you open for this recording session time? And they'll put it in their calendar and they'll show up. And what's really kind of cool is that there's a thing called cartage out there where the musician actually keeps their stuff with what's called a cartage company, right? This cartage company is that you are the producer, and we'll talk about what producers do more later. The producer will work with the cartage company and they'll make sure that that musician's equipment's there, so the musician just shows up, plays, and gets paid and leaves. It's kind of cool. So, but you'll see these in big towns. Of course, in a town like this, there's no set schedule like Nashville or LA or New York does, but you just basically set the schedule when we're all going to meet up and work with everyone's schedule. And in those towns, you also have a set amount that everyone gets paid. Everyone shows up. The recording guy fills out their time card and says, okay, you're here for this session, and it goes up to the AFM. They pay the AFM like a bulk amount at the end of the month, or I think it's quarter, I can't remember how it works. And then at the end of the quarter, you get a check in the mail for all the sessions that you did. Kind of cool. So there's job opportunity right there. So let's say I'm a country singer and I want to write my songs. I work with a time session, I get my musicians to show up, I upfront the money to do everything. Works pretty good. The union guys also, like I said, they're self-employed, they work in studios, radios, TVs, they also do live stuff as well. And of course, if you do some TV stuff, you could probably get repay fees, hopefully, if you get a good enough deal. Now this one's a little less popular out of the big three. American Federation of TV and Radio Artists. You're talking about announcers, singers, artists, actors, things like that. Kind of Actors Guild kind of stuff. I'm not an expert on this, and I honestly don't know too much about it. I just know that they deal with more TV and radio type stuff. Here's the one, if you're going to be in the music business, you have to know who these guys are. You just have to. AFM, you'll work with them less, but these guys, if you're into the business, you will deal with these guys, especially live stuff. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stagehand Employees. We just call them IA for short. So, just to keep it really short. This represents over like 100,000 members and includes technicians, artisans, craftspersons, and live theater, film, and TV publications and TV events. Pay scales, of course, differ. These are the guys, they're the typical people you hear about in the union where they show up and they have to work a minimal of like 4 hours and they get paid. Do you know that the minimal right now is like $15? I can't remember.
Yeah. Depends if you're ranked or
yeah, because the longer you've been, the more you get paid. and they have these different jobs and how they fit in. You got
I think for apprentices, it's like $10.
really. That sounds about right, because every city kind of varies and each local varies a little bit. And it really depends on the town, too, and how much work there is to do. But in fact, some of these union guys are here in town. We might have them just come over one day and we could pick their brain a little bit about more of what they do and how things work. So now going back to this, now hopefully you kind of get an idea, because the union guys are actually up here more on the touring side. They kind of got their field, their original niche from theater stuff. They used to work like making stages and running lights and their light techs and things like that. Well, in reality, us as musicians ripped the whole theater market off and put it on stage. We called it touring, basically, long story short. So now I'm a songwriter, I got my demo done, and it sounds pretty good. Now I need to get a following and I need to start networking. So what do you need to do? You guys ever heard of a press kit? So this is detrimental, you gotta have it. And actually, I just went over to Backbeats today, and I ran into my friend Meter, who works there, and I actually got his band's press kit. This band called Jaggertown, and this one actually, it's pretty good. And this is a very typical one, and this was a really good example, because since I'm a concert promoter, I could say this from experience, that if I'm looking at a local artist to put in front of a national, and I've got a stack this thick of press kits, you know, I don't want a ton of information to read. And in fact, if you look at this example, this is when I pull off the line. This is a pretty good list of things that you have: a cover letter, a picture of the band, the demo, basic things. But what I liked about this, it wasn't too wordy. And in like 45 seconds, I could tell you what style of country music they do, what their kind of style of country is. You know, they're more heavy, kind of grungy, fun kind of country. They did a pretty dang good job at doing this. I'm going to pass this around so you kind of get an idea what a press kit looks like, feels like. So if you ever started going producing and your artist doesn't want to get a press kit, tell them they have to, and it has to look good. This is something you don't want to send out that looks like a third grader made it for their, you know, their elementary school project. It's got to look like you are serious. Let me put it this way. So how many of you guys do online shopping, of course, right? How many of you have ever gone to a website looking for a product, and the product looked like the website looked like it was made in 1995? You don't trust it, do you? Like, it's the same thing with the press kit. You know, if I'm a booking guy and I'm trying to book a local artist and I get a press kit that was not even, like, that's a custom-made press kit with their logo on the cover. Like, that shows they're serious about this. They spend money on this. If I got one that's one of those from Walmart, you know, those envelope folders, it really doesn't say anything to me. It just says that they're just trying to just get by, basically. So now you pass this out, and actually what you do is that you pass this to anybody who could possibly book your band. Shoot, you can go to weddings if you wanted to, corporate events, but of course, you know, if you're doing original music, you want to try to get into clubs. And North Carolina was really good about, you send out a press kit, if it's a good press kit and your demo sounds good, you send it out to enough people, you probably will find a gig to open up for somebody at some point. And you keep opening up for people, eventually you're going to be headlining, you're going to get a following. So now we got our following. Things are, let's say I'm doing good, things are getting good, I'm doing about, I don't know, 200 people on a show on average in the Southeast. Not too bad, it's actually really amazing. But now that things are getting busy, I need a manager. So managers are extremely important. They're basically basic advisors to the artist. They do have somewhat of an artist say, depends on the management, the type of experience. Sometimes, in the instance, my teacher was working for Gorman Entertainment, and they actually do, it's like a group of managers, and they did like James Taylor, Alison Krauss, Keith Urban, and someone else, I can't remember. So he was actually employed from them, not by Keith Urban. They were paying Gorman Entertainment to have a manager along on tour with them. So these guys, actually, you know what, they take about 15 to 20% of whatever the artist makes. So if you're doing a small band in town and they're making, I don't know, a few thousand a month, and you're taking 15% of that, what's that? You know, you do the math on that. It actually could work out. Some managers will actually manage multiple bands and make a pretty decent living doing it. In fact, I found this really awesome video that I felt like, I think you could describe it better than I could. That is a double play. There it is.
I think artist management is like the equivalent in the corporate world would be like being a general manager of a company, a GM. Our responsibility is basically to articulate the vision of the artist throughout all the different aspects of their career, whether it's touring or television or recording, merchandising, to make sure that their business runs every day and that it's accurate to their vision. A day-to-day job for an artist manager in the music business is to oversee each component of their business operation. So the analogy I use is a wagon wheel. The artist is the hub of the wagon wheel, and the manager's kind of the bearings and the grease around the artist. And then the spokes are each individual part of their career. So one spoke is touring, one spoke is merchandising, one spoke is publishing, one spoke is recording, one spoke is public relations, one spoke is the record label, one spoke is the booking agency, one spoke is the band, and there are a few others. And these spokes are all the parts that are important to a well-rounded career for a music artist. And if the spokes are all in sync and they're all the same length, then the wheels round and the career rolls down the road and you can have success. If the spokes aren't well maintained, let's say the booking falls apart or the radio promotion falls apart at the label or merchandising, then what happens is you're not maximizing the career. You get a flat spot on the wheel. And my job is to make sure that sucker's round and rolling 24/7.
So that's probably a better description I could do. Does it make sense? That was a great analogy. One thing I will say is that if you're a smaller band, don't just get some guy who knows a little bit about it. That's why I wouldn't pick me to do it, personally. Pick someone who's more advanced than you, who's had experience in this. I mean, it's just kind of true with any field, right? So, like, you don't want to be in this, you don't want to be a early 20-something kind of band, and then your uncle says, well, I know my brother used to be in a band back in the 70s, and, maybe he can run your finances and maybe get you some shows, but if you get to a point where you surpass him, he's actually going to slow you down. And you should probably be picking an agent who's ahead of you, who's done more stuff, who's done the networking, knows a lot of people, who can really give you amazing advice to tell you how to become a great artist. That is if you're going into that field as a touring musician. So let's talk about booking agents really quick. So I'm in my group and I need to get a booking agent. Now things are getting pretty serious. My drummer was doing it or whatever. He was my booking agent. Now I need to find a real one. Booking agents are really cool. And I kind of think of them as just as important as the label, or probably not even more important. Because they will actually, if you have a good press kit and you have a good product and you do have someone with volume that's working for you, turn your press kit and say, hey, I got a following. I want to network more, I want to grow. They're going to put you in front of their larger acts, and eventually, of course, they want to make you a bigger act, so they're making a ton of money because they're making 10% to 50% of every show they book you for. It's not a bad deal. So the cool thing is that you get a booking agent, as one of my friends said, he said he wanted a booking agent that would kill for him, and he got a good one. He got one of the biggest ones in the country, and they plug it for you, and they try to get your marketing out there. They try to get you on the good shows, and because they want to make money just as much as you do. They want to make a living just like you do, honestly. They've already had a lot of networks, promoters, and clubs. So they kind of know what's going down. They know where your type of music will fit. And there are booking agents. I would say there's booking agents that do different types of music. There are classical booking agents. There are rock booking agents. There's hip hop. And of course, you want to find one that does your genre because they've done all the networking for your genre. But they do all the negotiation with the talent buyer. It's a new word. So there's agent and the buyer. What I do is I talent buy as a promoter. Clubs talent buy. Venues talent buy. Anybody who's hiring the artist is a talent buyer. That makes sense. So I already listed the talent buyers. Here's a little bit about talent buyers. I'm a promoter. That's what I do. I put in offers to agents for artists and book the venue. And then when I rent it out, I hire the sound guys and I put it all together. And hopefully I'll sell enough tickets to make a few bucks off of it. Honestly, after the day's over, I got a little more risk. It's a higher risk kind of job, but it's pretty fun. I'll admit that. Basically, I work with negotiate contracts with the booking agents and figure out the best deals. Try to find artists that I feel will work in the town I'm booking them in. Promoters can book in any town, not just their own. In fact, I could easily have thought about going back to North Carolina and booking shows over there, because I know sometimes I still know what works over there. One thing I will say is the contracts between the agent and the promoters. This is kind of important, and if you want to look professional, sometimes people put this in the press kit, they'll put their stage plot in there. You guys ever heard of a stage plot? I think some CSN knows. So I'm going to actually erase this really quick. Kind of check this out. Maybe, oh, I don't have any markers, do I? Probably should have. Oh, apparently I don't have any markers. So, make that mark through. So, basically, what a stage plot is a map. And I guess I should have just got one of my old contracts and grabbed a stage plot. Because you have, let's see if I can get this. Well, whatever, that works. So you have on the stage plot, you have on there like a square for the drummer, and you have like what he would need, what mics he would need. Sometimes, this is rare, but I don't really care, but what types of mics there are for the drum set. And you'll have like on your stage plot a DI for your keyboard, and you know, it'll just have a list of things on there that would be needed. So if you're a club guy and a guy hands you a stage plot, and have you seen a stage plot before? You worked with one? So you get one, and you know exactly what you need, right?
They're not always clear.
Well, they should be.
Most of them aren't clear.
It's so convenient if they are.
Yeah, if they are clear,
Oh.
and like that's what's really great if you work with a big $10,000 act, like I'm booking a big act. What's really great is you get this stage plot. I don't even read it. I handed the sound guy and say, here, take care of it. How much does it take to run sound for this guy? And they'll give me a quote. And it's all based off of that stage plot, and it's extremely important to have. If it's done right, the club guy has his inventory already lined up, and usually it's on stage anyway. You probably agree with that. It's like usually there. It's very rare to get something wacky.
The acts that I've worked with, usually if they have a really well thought out, clearly stated stage plot, they've been their own stuff anyway.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's true as well. But when you get into more advanced like club shows where you're dealing with 1,000 stand-all or a couple thousand people, you're going to have a stage plot. And if you don't, they probably shouldn't be having that following. They probably need to get a manager at that point. But in that contract, and the contract is it doesn't have to be anything complicated or simple. I actually got a copy of Keith Urban's contract that Jeff Little gave me, and it's like, it's huge stack. But it has everything to bus stock, to all the agreements, can't take pictures of the show, or things like that. A lot of the smaller shows, 500 to 2,000, they'll just hand you a sheet of paper and say, we just want water, we want set for it to sound good. That's all we really care. So, sometimes they'll go as far as saying, hey, we want catering, it just fits all those kind of things. Maybe you'll have a lesson on how those kind of contracts work as well later on. It'd be kind of cool. So, now royalties. So, let's say I'm a country singer now, I'm in my band. And so let's look at other avenues of income that I could do while I'm growing my band. So I have royalties. Have you guys ever messed with royalties at all? Anybody?
Yes.
They kind of do suck, but they can work in your favor if you know what you're doing. You have two types of royalties. You have the music publishing royalties. That's stuff you hear on the radio, the stuff played live. You have the mechanical royalties. That's the stuff that's printed on something hard, right? It's your CDs. So let's say, I like the concept that my teacher used to tell me that, you guys remember the song I Swear, right? So the big song in the early 90s, huge. It was a hit in 3 genres. It was done by John Michael Montgomery, All for One, and Boyz II Men. Now, who wrote the song? I like the comment, it's like, well, such and such stole the song from such and such. Well, actually, that's funny because neither of them wrote the song. It was actually, when my teacher was with John Michael Montgomery, they were playing on Austin City Limits for the TV show, and the piano player they rented out in Texas actually wrote the song like 1985, and it just never went anywhere. And actually, John Michael's staff actually heard the song before, and their song pluggers were like, no, it won't work. so they pushed it aside, and he actually personally handed it to my teacher and gave it to John Michael as well and said, hey, listen to this. They popped the tape in back away to the airport, and they looked at each other and said, this is a hit. We got to do this. So they recorded it. It was a big hit in country. All for One took it. It was a big hit in pop. And Boyz II Men took it. It was a big hit in R&B. And then it's like all over the world. Like, could you imagine you write one song and you're a billionaire? That's pretty nice. So this guy who wrote this song, he's got his music publishing royalties. That's on TV, it's on radio. So every time it's on TV, he gets paid. Not John Michael, not All for One, not not these other guys. He gets paid, right? When it's printed on his CDs, John Michael does get some money from the CDs, of course, and we'll talk about that in contracts. But as it says here on mechanical royalties, that all the money for the mechanical royalties go to Harry Fox Agency, and they divvy up who gets paid. And every quarter, he gets a check from every CD that, every time that song's printed on a CD. 9.1 cents a song. Well, I think John Michael went gold, or platinum. I know that single is like gold or something. I don't know, it's huge. So just on that CD alone, he's doing pretty well, before you even talk about radio. And basically, from there, the radio royalties go to 3 different companies, ASCAP, BMI. You probably guys have heard of this stuff. There's CSAC, which is a European company, which is not as popular, but it's for, from what I understand, like really rich people sign for it. I'm not an expert on CSAC, I'll be honest. But ASCAP and BMI, they basically take all the royalties from radio, airplay, TV, they put it all together, and then every quarter they send it to the songwriter. So really, if I'm in a guitar singer, or a singer-songwriter, and I have my country band, right? So, and I get to a certain level, well, I go to a song plugger, or go to a publishing company, and I push them to put on my song on the radio to get somebody to do it, right? So the publishing company takes 50% of every song they pitch to somebody. And actually my songwriter friend writes with the same people writes with Kenny Chesney. Funny thing is, Kenny Chesney's never written a song. He just knows how to pick good songs. Now here's a class discussion, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Who cares if it makes you money?
Exactly. He's probably not a good songwriter, and he's kind of like me, has this huge passion for playing like all of us, and wants to make a living at this, but he knows he can't write a song. So you're not going to send out crap if you want to make a living at it, right? So what do? You find other people that make a living. And in fact, in the 50s, this is how it was. When the Beatles came out, let's see, the Beatles, who else was it? Elvis, Nat King Cole, the names are coming out. All those guys, they were just confusing the industry because, wait a minute, you write your own music and you perform it? This is weird. Like, seriously, that's how it was. You just did, the songwriters were the songwriters, and the musicians were the ones that played the songs. That's how it was. Now we have people doing both. Now people think it's weird when we separate them. I don't know. I just say as long as you're doing okay, what does it matter? I think they're good songs. I don't really care. And you'll find as we go in that creating music and being successful in music is a team effort. You can't do it on your own. Anyway, how much time do I have? So I'm working on it. It's 4 o'clock. So we've already talked about song publishers. You can co-pub, by the way. Co-publishing is where you pitch your own songs. The guy who probably wrote I Swear is probably doing co-pub now because everyone is going to him for his songs. No one's going to a publishing company for him anymore, so he's getting like 25% to himself and 25% to the publishing company. So my warning is, and I've heard deals with publishing companies, if you ever get a songwriting and they try to take more than 50%, say no. So I've heard stories where they'll screw you over. That's just an industry standard. So anyway, so now we're going to talk about record labels. I think a lot of you guys are going to like this a lot more. We're getting down to the fun stuff. So I'm in my band, and we want to start. We're starting to talk to record labels. But who do you talk to? This is kind of what I'm going to bring up. Who are the guys that are talking to you? Well, I'm not going to talk about the label owner. It's kind of obvious, but the A&R guys are really important. These are the guys who are the talent scouts. They look for you. They find you. You can, like I said, the press kit again, kind of important. You can send in the press kit to an A&R guy. There's nothing stopping you from that. And especially if you have news clippings in there and show that you're big, they'll get interested. Especially if they've heard of your name. In fact, Polestar does all of the averages of shows. They put all these numbers together and average out how much a artist is selling a show. And if they're on Polestar and they're seeing, wow, this guy's actually doing like 500 on average in the nation. Who are these guys? People start wondering when you're actually selling. And when you have that foundation, your A&R guys are going to come to you. You probably don't even have to send in your press kit. Especially, if you're like, who was that band? Hootie and the Blowfish. I think they went to South Carolina one day and sold 2,000 CDs in a show. So they took a distribution deal, from what I understand. If I'm thinking of the right group, I could be wrong, but there are bands that take distribution deals because they're just making too much money without the label. They don't need them. That's a better way to live, actually. So to get a better understanding of A&R guys and what they do, I found another video.
A&R stands for artist.
A&R stands for Artists and Repertoire, and it's exactly what you think it is. It's artists. 50% of the job is going out and talent scouting, finding artists for the label, getting to know them, and eventually offering them a record contract if you want. The other 50% of the job is the repertoire part. It's helping those artists make records, make the records that they want to make, but make records at the same time that are commercially viable and will be hopefully profitable for the record company. Generally, the A&R department, we're sort of the Marines, we're the talent scouts. We go out and find the artists. The way it works at my record company is then I might bring the music back, even bring the artist back to showcase for the label, and if everybody else is as excited about the music and the artist as I am, then we offer them a record deal. I end up in going out to hear music and end up in clubs, and in my case sometimes churches because I work for a Christian record company, probably at least 2, oftentimes 3 or 4 nights a week. Primarily it's the talent scout, but also I'll go see the artists that are on my roster. For A&R, the dialogue continues with the artist even after you've made the record. It's important that their live show's working and that it's connecting with people live. So I go out to support the artists that are on my roster that I've signed, give them feedback on their live show. Also go out to just hear bands. I mean, a lot of times it's bands on other labels, but just to sort of stay plugged into what's happening in music right now. Generally, when you're scouting artists, you're looking for a combination of a few different characteristics. I mean, first and foremost, it's got to be great music. It's got to be music that you personally connect with and you think is at a high value. Secondly, it's got to be music that you think is commercially viable, that you're convinced not only you will like, but that there's an audience in the rest of the country for. But beyond the music, there's a lot of things you tend to look for that are not, that are extra musical, that aren't related to just the music the artist makes. Oftentimes, it's a willingness to travel. I mean, I would just probably say in general, ambition. Artists that spend a lot of time on the road, that go out and promote their music, that they're comfortable doing it, because that's such a huge part of life after you sign a record deal. It's not just making the record, you have to go out and support it. And I would also say there's a personal dynamic to great artists. They tend to be charismatic people in one way or another. So much of like having success in the music business is going into radio stations and meeting with radio programmers and going to do interviews with the press, and so there's got to be a dynamic personality outside of just the musician that makes the art. Well, developing repertoire for artists it's different in each case. I mean, I've signed artists where they've made literally 5 or 6 independent records, so what's required, and they've played hundreds and hundreds of live shows, so what's required at that point is just fine-tuning. Maybe it's taking the existing record that they've made and it's just remixing it, or it's adding a few tracks to it. That happens a lot in the music industry. And then I've signed a girl who was 13 years old who had never really played a live concert before. So that was a 2.5-year process, and that involved a lot of putting her with producers to look and try and find where the right chemistry was, trying to help her develop material, like having her submit songs regularly where she sends them in, we sit and listen to them, we tear them apart, we give feedback, and so she becomes a better writer through the process. So it's really different in each case. Sometimes the artist is fairly developed by the time you start working with them. Other times they're at square one, and you see something raw that you really believe in, and so you spend time developing it. What I'm finding now is that more than ever, artists are more developed than they've been in the past. Everybody now has a computer with a Pro Tools rig on it. They're making their own records, they're burning their own CDs, they're designing their own artwork most of the time on their computers, so they're tending to be a lot more developed, and they come in, and I love this, they come in with a lot stronger opinions and a more defined sense of who they are and what they want to do with their music. I've seen that change dramatically in the 5 years that I've been doing A&R.
I'm in my band, and I talked to an A&R guy and said, yes, we're interested, let's do this. So he pulls out contracts. We really need to get a guy to come over and talk about this, because this gets so in-depth, contracts. They can get very thick. But we're going to have to cover some verbiage here before we really start going into this. Points, package, options, and recoup. You have to know these words, or you're just not in the music business. I don't know how else to put it. Has anybody heard these terms before? Okay, maybe yes and no. These are direly important to know. Your points, anybody heard the term, the Dow went up 2 points today or something like that? This is the same kind of thing. It's really just a percentage. So if you look at 100 points, 100%, you're talking about points. Basically the same kind of thing. percent you're going to make off the retail price of a record sales. Most are 8 to 15 points. Just think percentages, basically, off the final product of the CD. So we'll talk about that in a second. Packaging. Packaging takes 20-25%. That's always taken out of the full price. It's basically just packing, which is kind of funny. I think that's probably going to fall off the map one day because everything's going digital. There's less CD sales. They're dropping fast. Options, very important word. I like, this is really interesting to try to explain. Basically, I'll just read it. It says, this is a full-length record. So think of it as an option as a record. There's a little more intel that deals with like tours and other parts of the agreement. Just think of it as a record that you released. This full-length record, artists usually sign for a number of options, maybe 1 or 2, 3, or 4. Artists cannot be signed to another label until they have practiced all their options. Does that make sense? Raise your hand if I completely lost you. Okay, good. That was you?
No,
Okay.
I understood.
Okay, cool. And anytime the artist at that time the options are practiced, the label can renegotiate a new contract, basically. But you never sign for too many. Please don't sign for too many options. I knew some friends that signed with a label that was a very big indie label, very big. Basically, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to point names and cause a bad rap because that'd be kind of rude. But they signed with a big indie label and they signed for like an insane amount of options, and then things weren't going bad with the label. The thing is that the artist cannot drop the label until they have practiced all those options. So if I'm supposed to make, I practiced for 8 CDs, I have to do 8 CDs until I can negotiate with another company. So I can't leave until I've done my options and fulfill the contract. But however, the label can drop you whenever they want, right? So the thing is, they signed for so many options and they just broke up because they locked themselves in, they sold their souls, I guess you could say, and they're stuck. So that's honestly, I think they didn't get a lawyer to look at their stuff. I really don't know. I wasn't there when I signed it. Recouping. This is a really important one. So you get advances for money for recording your CD. You're going to get advances for touring and all this stuff. Let's say this is a major label. They're going to just throw a couple $100,000 at your artist or your work, and then you have to pay them back. And that's called recouping. So they give you all these advances for all this stuff, and you have to recoup off your CD sales. You don't recoup off your tour money. This is important to keep in mind. There are 360 deals that are coming out that I'm just reading out this past week that are trying to take royalties from your songs, or from if you're writing songs from your band. They're trying to take your song royalties, or trying to take more of your mechanical royalties, and all that stuff. Typically, you're not supposed to do that, and there's actually a lot of mixed feelings about this stuff. It's all negotiable, just keep that in mind. So if a label pays me $250,000 and gives me all this money to make a CD and go on tour to be successful, honestly, most people don't recoup. Believe it or not, AC/DC, I heard somewhere, this is like late 90s, that AC/DC finally recouped from all their platinum CDs that they had. So, and it takes a while, if you think about that, and I'll show you why it does. Does that make sense? Recouping and options is kind of important terms. So these are the big 4. Everything pretty much is owned by these guys. Sony, EMI, Universal, and Warner Music Group. I think I wish I was trying to contact my old school because one of my teachers had this huge PowerPoint where he broke down who owns who. Like J Records is owned by this guy, Reprise is owned by Warner Brothers. So it's Beyonce signed with Reprise, which is owned by Warner Brothers, which is owned by Warner Music, which is owned by Warner Brothers. So everybody seems to own everybody. And let's see if I don't have the whiteboard, and I wish I had it. So kind of visually go with me on this. So you sign a contract with your major label, and let's say the retail on your CD is $15 for your CD. Your packaging is going to be 20%, so that's $3 off right there, and you get 8 points, right? So that's $1.20 off of every CD. Make sense? And the label's making X amount of dollars off the CD already. So it breaks down. It's really funny. The rest why CDs cost so dang much is because when you buy it, it goes out in so many different directions. Really, the artist is probably only making $1 off of that CD. And the funny thing is, if you have a band, you still got to break that dollar up. between everybody in your band. Just kind of
Yeah,
stinks.
recoup you if the dollar goes to the.
Exactly. So the thing is that you're recouping on is that 8 points that you signed for. Does that make sense? So, which really is what takes so dang long, is because I got to pay back $1.20 until that hits $250,000, right? It takes a while. So if you think about it, do the math. So if I sold 70,000 units of CDs, times that by $1.20 or whatever, it's only like a few hundred. Was it like, I think I did the math earlier. It was like 60,000. It's like what, a third of the way. Dylan's doing the math earlier.
84 grand.
84 grand. So that's not 200,000. That's way less. But that doesn't mean a label's going to drop you. They could or they couldn't. They could say, well, you sold so many, so now we're just going to drop you. That doesn't mean that, really. They could say, hey, that was great, let's do it again. They're still making money off of you, off the other money. The good thing is, on a good record contract, you will not have to pay back if they drop you. Does that make sense? So really, it's a bust on their part. There are contracts that I'm hearing about now where they're making you pay that back if they drop you. I don't recommend that. It's just my opinion. But I would say, don't ask me. Advise your manager and your lawyer, your music lawyer, when you get to that point. I'm not the guy to talk to. I probably will be pretty soon because I'm in a band that's getting looked at by a major, and I can at least speak to some level of that. But I don't look at the contract. I'm not doing the signing. I just play drums. So that's all I can say. So here's kind of like another point to the majors is give you guys an idea of what they do. Is that they have a lot of networking. They got a lot of money. They can get you on the radio, which some indie labels can do that now. Fueled by Ramen has Panic at the Disco, and they're an indie label. They're on radio, they're on TV. So that's not always true, but they're bigger. Lots of networking, lots of money. They have a larger ability, a lot more staff to push your people. My friend William Joseph, who's on Reprise, which is owned by Warner Brothers, he has like 50 people who push his stuff in Canada and stuff like that. So really cool. And the label owns the masters. So once you create your CD, and they own your CD at that point, which is good and bad. And there's ups and downs to it. We can talk about it all day long, and that's negotiable as well. We can talk about that, but the good side is that they don't have to come to you every 5 minutes and say, hey, we want to put an ad for your CD in Walmart. They don't have to come to you and ask for your permission for your picture. They just kind of own it. They just do whatever they want. The problem is once you practice all your options, if you get dropped, if you practice all your options and you leave and you go to another label, I'm trying to think of some examples, I can't, of course. You go to another label, well, they kept your CDs. The Beatles. They used to be with Columbia. They started their own label after they practiced their own options. They started Apple Records. That's why you look at half the CDs and they say Columbia on the back, the other half say Apple. It just kind of works like that because they were signed by Columbia at that point. Columbia still owns those records.
So they still get paid royalties off of the...
They're still making money off of them, yeah.
Okay.
Columbia and Apple. I think Michael Jackson apparently bought Apple, I heard. I don't know, I don't keep up with that. So the thing is that even if someone is selling your CD still and they're not yours, it's your song. You're still making money off the song. So it's not like it's the end of the world.
So the master is not the song itself, it's like the final edit?
Yeah, the final product when the CD is sent out. And that's almost impossible to get from a label. Actually, Ray Charles is able to pull it off. You've seen the movie Ray. He practiced all of his options with Atlantic. He went over to ABC. His A&R guys were talking to him, and he flat out said, I want to own my own masters. In the movie, he gets laughed at by the A&R guy. He says, no, Frank Sinatra doesn't even own his own masters. Well, he got it anyway, because ABC wanted him really bad. That's why everything in music's all negotiable. And so he had a foundation. Just keep this in mind. If you're a Joe Schmo band coming out of the woodwork, you're not going to be able to do that. He was able to do that because he has such a huge international foundation. He could do whatever he wanted. Every label wanted him to do with it. Now these days, he probably would be signing a distribution deal, and they'd be lucky just to have his CDs in their hands. Honestly. So here's some indie labels. Fueled by Ramen. They have like Yellow Card, Panic at the Disco, I think. Tooth and Nail. They have Amberlin, Emery, Solid State. They're like their hardcore version. Even though Tooth and Nail, so I think they're supposed to be a Christian label. Epitaph. They had at one point they had The Offspring, but I think they went to a major. Fearless has Plain White Tees. Pluto, my buddy owns Tribuna Records. They actually found Atreyu and like a few other guys as they lay dying, their hardcore label. He actually was a really good mentor and friend of mine, and I actually thought about asking him to come fly in from North Carolina because he knows how to run a very successful independent label. But anyway, Victory Records, they got a ton of good artists on there. I'm sure some of you guys have seen these. Less money, more guerrilla style of marketing. You guys know what I mean by that? So you don't get these big marketing. It's very strategic marketing. They have like street teams. They'll go out, and some of these street teams are like cold followings. I don't know how they do it, but they'll send out and say, hey, this band came out with a new CD, and all of a sudden their street team just put it in like every CD store in America. Some of these guys have the ability to do that. At least it seems like it does.
Unconventional marketing.
It's not typical. It's kind of under the radar. It's networking a lot more like that, and it does work really well. Some of these guys can pull it off. Yeah, some of these guys pull it off very well. I think like Reliant K, like they get a little bit of they're on an indie and they just tooth and nail. Like I think they're on Tooth and Nail, and they just tooth and nail, and Epitaph just got this crazy marketing system. It's really good.
So what's the definition between a major label and an indie label?
Actually, I was going to show that out. The artist owns the masters with the indie.
Okay.
Typically, it's all negotiable. It seems like Epitaph is so big and Tooth and Nail is so big that they seem like a major, but they're not.
Basically, they're owned by one of the big four.
Yeah, that's kind of true in a lot of ways. They're not. There's a lot more control that the artist has on their artwork. You get a lot more input from your A&R guy and from the executives about how can you be more marketable. A lot of times, any labels just are happy that they just seem to be happy that you're there. You know? But they'll give you like instead of $10,000 a song on your album, they'll give you like $10,000 for your whole CD. Now let's be honest, you know, you could probably, my buddy, the band that I'm in now, he put 15 grand on a CD and it sounds freaking amazing. Just for the CD, and some of these artists are pulling 10 grand a song. I mean, I personally don't think that's, my opinion, the Book of Brian, I don't think that's really needed anymore. You know, some of you guys are like screwing around with Ableton and Pro Tools, and you guys are doing pretty decent mixes, and you sit there in Dr. Cottle's classes, and you can do a mix himself that's pretty good. You know? So he knows what he's doing, and I highly recommend his class around taking it, honestly. Here's this guy. Unfortunately, I couldn't convert it over to a video and put it on here, but so I put the link. And he actually used to be Prince's manager, so I think he has good input. So, see if I can get this over here. Let's see, where's my mouse at? Okay. Yeah, he founded like Prince. He was back in his early days. Let's see. It really gets confusing trying to do this.
Do you sign with these big behemoths, these big behemoth record labels versus the indie route? For some artists, it's good to go an indie route. Now, you may, instead of getting, you know, $250,000 a major record, you might get $5,000 or $10,000. And there's a lot of, you know, quandaries. Do we go indie? Do we go to a major label? What's the best for us? I'm even struggling that with, you know, with my group right now. Do we go indie? Do we go to the major label? Well, there's pros and cons on both sides. Yes, if you sign the big behemoth major label, you're going to get a bunch of money. You could be unrecouped and your career could be over tomorrow. However, if you are going to be successful, then you better be on a major label, because when that chairman says, gee, this record by the Four Chairs is getting a lot of play around the United States, I'm going to push that button. When he pushes that button, or she pushes that button, your records are in every store in America, probably in Europe, when they decide to get behind your record and push that big button. So if you believe in yourself and you think you're fabulous, then you're going to want to be on a major record label, because they're going to get your records into the stores. I don't call them CDs, I call them records. They're going to get your records into the stores, everywhere, and they're going to get behind you. If you flop, you're going to flop big time at a major label, and they're going to kick you up, and you can be, you know, washed up. Indie label, you can get a lot of attention on an indie label. You can get them working side by side with you, getting you out on the road, helping you sell your CDs off the road, you know, from your car or from wherever you're going to be doing it. which is what bands nowadays should be doing anyways. They will help you. An indie label can send you out under the radar, and you can build a fan base in a lot of cities. So you're not going to sign for a lot of money, you're not going to make your CD for a lot of money. But they will pay you the absolute attention. And they have a lot of connections to get you into this club in Tulsa, this club in Phoenix. So the first time you get into that club, maybe there's 9 people that see you. The second time you come back there's 20 people if you're selling your CDs. The third time you come back, to Ann Arbor, now there's 500 people in the club. And so what a band really wants to do in that situation is an indie label will get behind you, you can get out on the road, you can build a base at colleges and do all of that, and you can get known. The bands have to tour these days, they have to get out and build that base in each of these cities and build a fan base. You've got to do that. And then you take your stack of CDs and you sell them at the gig for, $8 a piece. So let's say you're getting, $300 to play the gig, and now you sold another $300 in CDs, you're getting $600, You move on to the next city, and that indie label is supporting you. The problem with the indie label is they don't have the funding to be able to get you any kind of airplay properly in this day and age, which the whole state of radio in America right now is abhorrent. And they're not going to be able to really get the giant funding. Let's say your record starts to take off in Phoenix, and all of a sudden you're huge, and then it spreads to other cities, and they may not be able to react fast enough. Their distribution stream may not be as large. But I believe they both have functions. But just in the case of Nirvana, they were on Sub Pop. Eventually they had to go to a major. I think they went to Geffen to make them happen. There are a few good labels out there these days. There are some systems that aren't broken. There aren't labels that have been bought by, other companies that have nothing to do with the music business, and then they fire all the good people within them because they're cranking the numbers. Even the big behemoth record labels should have true little indie offshoots that just do nothing but get bands out there and build fan bases in these cities. And then if the band starts to make it, they can just walk upstairs to the behemoth. That to me would be the good model for it to happen. Because then your band isn't, you're not on recoup for all these millions of dollars walking into your next record. You're not spit out by, what happens is, at the majors, you get all of this money, and it really comes down to a bean counter within that label. Because the bean counter in the meetings that they all go into, because it is a business. There's 2 words to show business, show and business. Artists have to understand that. But it comes down to the point where you say, God, we really love that group, the 4 Chairs. We all think they're great, but geez, they only sold 70,000 units. So the bean counter, he rolls up his sleeve.